It's Thursday. It's 10:30. It's the 18th day of February. I am your grumpy guy to all things gaming, and I would complain about the weather and my sinuses in my ear, but then I look at the news and I see that it is snowing in Texas. The last place anybody would ever expect it to snow. So really, I can't complain about the weather. So instead, support me, Pepsi. I need a sponsor, and I will sell out. I have no moral high ground. Bad for me. Okay, it's Thursday. Time for some GM tips. And we're continuing with our theme for the past few weeks of NPCs and dealing with NPCs. And we've done combat, we've done murder hobos, we've done ways to come up with, making your NPCs important, but not too important. We even addressed the issues like, well, what if they kill the NPCs? But now let's address the opposite issue. The cute and fuzzy scenario, as we call it, or the Young Keg scenario, as I call it, where your players fall in love and become almost bizarrely obsessed with an NPC and leaving you with like the, you want to take the bartender out on a date? Okay. So my personal experience with the cute and fuzzy is, of course, the story of Young Keg, who is 22-year-old and still loves to dance, which is a story I've told before, and I'll tell it again in a second. But it's just an example of players becoming infatuated with an NPC, and the DM, in that case me, but I've seen other people happen to him, and I've heard other GMs talk about it. Boy, I cannot talk today. I need more soda. Or maybe I should switch to coffee. Where the player characters become obsessed with an NPC or some animal or whatever, and they want to invest all their time and energy in involving themselves with the life of this NPC. And the GM's like, what do I do? And the answer is, well, you use the NPC as a MacGuffin to get them back on track. If they're completely lost focus of what's ever going on, to invest themselves in the lives of this NPC for reasons no one really understands, other than we're weird and we get obsessed over the strangest things. And I guess everybody loves a soap opera. I don't know. That now you have a new way to get them back on track. So my personal experience with the cute and fuzzy scenario is, of course, again, the story of Young Keg. I was running a game a couple years ago. They were in town. They were talking to NPCs, trying to get clues to, if I remember correctly, had anybody seen the bad guy? They knew he was hiding somewhere in town, and they had some general information to go on, so they figured they would just ask people to see if they'd seen anybody matching the description. So we were using a random table to generate names and stuff about NPCs that we were experimenting with. I think it was from a book called The Whispering Homunculus or something like that, that somebody had found. And so for every NPC, we'd roll their name, we'd roll a little bit information about them. So they walk into a tailor shop. I don't know, and I roll the name, and it's Young Keg. So I guess, I'm thinking medieval names. Keg the Younger, Young Keg, which means his father is probably Keg the Elder. Fine, Young Keg. And then we roll, on the other things, like Young Keg, who's 22 and still loves to dance. Unusual, but I guess, you could build a medieval story from a medieval village about that guy. He's the son of a tailor. He's got his father's name. Maybe he liked to dance when he was younger, but he can't really do it anymore, because now he's taking over the tailor business from his dad. And so it's like he still likes to dance, but he really just can't do it anymore. Whatever. He gave us something definitive about the NPC, but, it was an NPC. It was a fire and forget. They were going to talk to him, roll some dice, and keep moving. At least that's what you think would happen. But I guess the first thing that stood out was his name, Young Keg, and he's 22 that still loves to dance. Everybody thought that. So already they were kind of a little like, wow, that's different. That's got my attention, which should have been my first warning sign, but we ran with it. So the scenario plays out. They're talking to him. They ask him a question, and I'm going to, roll a d20 for every answer to see how accurate Keg's answer is to what they're trying to find out, which is, did Keg see this guy, and if he knows where he is. So the first question, natural 20. Yes, Keg saw the guy. There's no question that Keg saw the guy. He remembers him clearly. Next question, natural 20. Yes, Keg remembers the guy clearly. He remembers the direction the guy went. And now everybody's like, yeah, okay, this Keg guy, he really knows what's going on. I was like, okay. The next question, natural 20. I don't think I've ever in my gaming history rolled this many natural 20s in a row. And the next question is like, yes, he remembers seeing the guy. He distinctly remembers everything about the guy. He knows exactly where the guy waits. Keg has an infallible memory. There's no such thing as photographic memory in D&D. There's a feat, I think, that's close to photographic memory, but in the game we were playing at the time, there was nothing like it. I think we were playing Pathfinder. I'm not sure. But so we're like, oh God, he just remembers everything. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, they're going to do something with this guy because he remembers everything. If the next roll is high, I'm doomed. So they do you know where he went? Without a shadow of a doubt, because we now know that Keg remembers, pretty much has an excellent memory to the point of being almost superhuman photographic memory. And the final question, and the roll is a 19. He knows exactly where the guy went. He knows exactly what time he went there. He probably knows exactly how long he was there. And just as I'm finishing the sentence, I could already hear the words coming from the player's mouth, even though they hadn't formulated it with them, but I knew what they were going to say. We're taking him with us. So basically they kidnapped Keg and took him with them to the various things to see if he noticed the things, to see if he remembered things, to see if he could help them track down the bad guy with his infallible memory. Of course, this is when Keg's roll started to become really crappy, like 1s and 2s and 3s, which basically developed that while Keg remembers everything clearly and has an almost supernatural photographic memory, he has no social tact whatsoever. Like, he has a really low charisma. Like, he's the kind of guy that when you tell him not to say something or ruin a surprise, he'll ruin a surprise or say the exact thing you told him not to say without realizing it, because he has no social tact. Like, Keg, whatever you do, don't mention the king's nose. And like the first thing out of his mouth will be, dude, your nose is so big. So now we have got all these things that makes Keg stand out, and they're now just like, we are in love with Keg. And the scenario plays out, and they have to leave town. And I'm like, they're going to take Keg with them. And sure enough, they walk into the shop and basically con Keg's master into signing over Keg's contract to them. So instead of Keg now being an apprentice beholden to this tailor, he is now an apprentice beholden to the party. And the party has now basically kidnapped Keg, and they take him kicking and screaming with them on the adventure. He has no adventuring skills whatsoever, but they justify it like, well, they don't have a healer, but Keg's a tailor. He stitches fabric together and leather together. Is skin any different than fabric? He can be the party's healer because he can stitch their skin together when they get hit. That's how they justify kidnapping Keg. But basically, from that point on, for the rest of the campaign, Keg was with them. And to make matters worse, as usually what happens in these scenarios, every time they found an extra magic item that nobody else in the party wanted or could use, they gave it to Keg. So they find a magic sword, Keg. A magic belt, Keg. A magic cloak, Keg. This 0-level, first-level commoner is now getting experience and getting magic items. All the while, he's just like, I want to go home. I'm going to marry the girl next door. I'm going to inherit this tailor business, I'm going to take my family name. But they're like, nope, you love to dance, blah, blah, blah. You remember everything. So they start giving him money, giving him treasure, donating party experience to level him up. They decide, he's a ranger for some reason. I don't know why they decided he was a ranger, but I guess tracking was the closest thing that they could find to his photographic memory. So they take him with him. And through the process of Stockholm Syndrome, PTS, Keg starts identifying with the characters. He still doesn't really want to be here, but he now realizes, well, am I the only competent, intelligent person in this party? Because everything these guys are doing is stupid. And I'm a nobody from the city who doesn't know the first thing about the wilderness, but I know that's dumb. So he starts leveling up, and the campaign goes through, and a very small to medium percentage of every game was doing something for Keg, or getting something for Keg, or Keg somehow doing something that ended up helping the party, and they would obsess and invest all this energy in this one-shot NPC who should have just gone home. And by the end of the campaign, Keg's got almost as much magic item and money as the rest of the party. He's like only one level behind the party, or 2 levels behind the party in experience as a first level commoner, 5th level ranger who is training in the healing proficiency because he stitches up their skin. He ends up like becoming a sheriff of some village, and they're like a hero of the war. And like 2 years after that campaign ended, people would still bring Keg up and like imagine what Keg had happened. Like, I wonder what it's like. So there is a perfect example of the cute and fuzzy scenario where suddenly they're like taking this NPC with them and becoming obsessed with this NPC. Now, I could have become upset. I could have fought against it, but I ran with it. And every time things got bogged down, I would use the NPC as the voice to get them back on track. If they were going to obsess with Keg, that I could use Keg as the tool whenever things got weird without, Deus Ex Machina. I had to, of course, rationalize that I, as the DM, know what's going on, but there's no way Keg would know what's going on. But still, I could use Keg as my mouthpiece and as my MacGuffin to get them back on track. When they were obsessing about Keg or obsessing about something silly that didn't have to do directly or indirectly with the story I wanted to tell, Keg became the MacGuffin, the linchpin, the way to get them back on track. So that is a perfect example of how, if you, a game master, find yourselves in this position when your players have become obsessed with an NPC or an animal or something innocuous that has absolutely nothing to do with the game, and you were just going to completely forget about, but now they've become obsessed with it and they're like giving it magic items and shit, you could use that instead of becoming upset and using it as something to bog down the key. Now you have something that's actually intrinsic to their story that they are interested in, that you can use as your voice to move things forward. You want to be obsessed about the NPC? Fine. Then I'm going to use the NPC as a way to keep you motivated. I will place the NPC in trouble. I will use the NPC as the voice of reason. I will have the NPC say things that make sense to the NPC, but still are a way to move things forward. So there you go. That's how I would deal with that scenario. If you've ever run into a Young Keg in your campaign, comment down below. If you appreciate this content and want to hear more, comment down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Help me reach 500 subs by August 4th. And until then, as always, I am your grumpy guide to all things gaming, the shill who's climbing up the hill. I will sell out. Yo, GGM. Talk to you later.